Greetings, everyone. Welcome to Inside the Music for March of 2020 in preparation for the Fresno Philharmonic concert coming up. We are so absolutely delighted that you're here, and even the little gray kitty is overjoyed that you've joined us this morning for a discussion with some very, very special guests. So bravo to you. Pat yourselves on the back for being here. Raise a cup of coffee or cup of tea, and we're going to have a good time.
We're on top of it.
So make sure that you mute if you're not speaking, so that we don't get the feedback or hear something you might not want us to hear. So some upcoming shows. We, of course, are going to have, this is the upcoming show that's going to clarinetist with Juan Pablo Contreras. And
he's a clarinetist.
A world premiere, and Elgar, Enigma Variations. But then we have another Masterworks concert, and this is in preparation for more of a focus on Mahler in upcoming season. So that'll be on Sunday, May the 8th. Do you want to tell us a little bit more about what's upcoming with Ray?
Yes, so in May, we are embarking on a Mahler Symphony series here at the Fresno Philharmonic. And we're going to explore Mahler Symphony every season. And we're going to start with the first one, the Titan Symphony. But alongside that, we will feature a woman composer named Lily Boulanger, French woman composer from the turn of the century. And this is a piece called A Morning of Spring. So we thought it would be fitting to feature these wonderful composers together, but also to explore these symphonies by Mahler and why now, or why should we hear them now? So stay tuned for more information about this wonderful concert, upcoming concert in May, which really features the orchestra at its height. Thank you.
Wonderful, and I'm so excited that you're doing a Mahler every season. I think that's a wonderful thing to do. It's just,
you meant.
Isn't Lily the sister, or is it the sister or niece of the famous Nadia Boulanger?
Yes, so Lily Boulanger is the younger sister of Nadia Boulanger.
Younger sister, okay.
Yeah, younger sister, and she died at the age of 24.
Oh my gosh.
Yeah, in 1918, she passed away. And it's interesting to note that Nadia was an incredible composition pedagogue for many, many decades afterwards. She lived well into her 90s, but she didn't compose. And sometimes I think about this and I reflect back, maybe she was intimidated by her younger sister's brilliant composition, that she never, pursued composition herself, but that she taught such notable composers as Aaron Copland and many, many others.
Right, well, you've given me something to research for the next Inside the Music. So thank you for the cue. We work together here at the Fresno Philharmonic. So I discovered, looking at the website, just to bring your attention, if you weren't aware of it, on the Fresno Philharmonic website, we have this new feature, Fresno Phil On Demand. So I just invite you to go there. You can look at various. So I think that's a really cool new feature. So I'd like you, audience, here's your first participation. Let's imagine, I'm going to ask you to go into fantasy world, and you are the chief executive of the Fresno Philharmonic, or you're the music director, and you have to choose a new pianist or timpanist for the Fresno Philharmonic. How are you going to go about doing that? Any ideas? Unmute real quickly or put it in the chat. Oh, Lorenzo, tell us.
Well, you place an ad in the National Musicians Union publication for an open auditions, and then you have people submit recordings, and then from them, you choose a number of finalists, have them show up, and do several series of behind the screen auditions all the way through the finals.
Okay, you mean you don't hire your sister?
No, that wouldn't be fair, wouldn't it?
What? Why not?
She could go through the process like everybody else.
Ah, but you want to make sure that you hire them. I thought you hired the one that got you the best dinner. Okay.
Well, they could
So,
submit that. They could submit their recipes also along with their application.
so Ray, tell us real quickly, what's the term for the type of process that you use to hire someone new?
Oh, well, we go through an audition process, exactly what Lorenzo was saying. What term am I missing? What do you think?
Well, I searched for this. This is kind of funny. I searched for this term to get a good image for this slideshow, and I'm a little bit frightened by what I saw. But a blindfolded audition, right? So this is the tamest image I could come up with. And right, Ray, the way that it works, there's a screen, so you can't see the person that's playing, and you don't know who's playing, right?
Right.
And
yes, this is a process that started, I believe, and correct me if I'm wrong, Stephen. I believe it started in the early 70s, 1970s. Yeah. And this was a way to eliminate any discrimination against whoever is auditioning, whether it's the gender, what they look like, who their brother or sister is, or maybe the conductor knows this person, or maybe the timpanist knows this timpanist, or maybe it's a student. And so we wanted to eliminate any of those parameters that might hinder our decision, and have it behind, the judges are behind a screen, a black screen, so they cannot hear or notice anything about the auditionee other than the music that they are playing for us. And it's
right. So
yeah.
Even if someone likes to dress up like an alligator, they might end up getting the audition, right? And as Stephen Wilson says, this is the last bastion of meritocracy. I love that quote, Stephen. Now, what this has done, right? If you look at the big orchestras, the Boston, Philadelphia, Chicago, New York, Phil, and Cleveland, this is a chart. And remember, Ray was saying around the 60s, late 60s, this is where this started to happen. This is the proportion of females in orchestras. And you can see that this blind audition process really did make it so there's greater diversity in orchestra performers. And Stephen was even telling me they take the cell phones away from the auditionees. They choose by number. They pick out of a hat what order they're going in. Go to these great lengths to make sure it's a completely fair process. Everyone, I am waiting for the announcement, which will come very soon, about who won the position and who won with the Fresno Philharmonic. So it's so exciting that they're filling these positions and continuing to grow. Yay! So let's move on to the program, and let's get into the music for the program of the concert coming up. So the first piece is by someone maybe you've heard before. He's been in Fresno before. He did work with the youth orchestra. Juan Pablo Contreras, an up-and-coming composer from Mexico. And there's some news next season with what's going to happen with Juan Pablo. Ray, do you want to tell us about that real quick?
Sure. I'm very excited to, first of all, introduce Juan Pablo Contreras to our Fresno Philharmonic audiences. He is a wonderful composer from Los Angeles and also from Mexico originally. But we are excited because next season we are in a consortium of orchestras that are co-commissioning a piece from him. And we will present this new piece by Juan Pablo next season. And it's wonderful because we are working with orchestras from across the country who are part of this commission, from the Las Vegas Philharmonic to the Louisiana Philharmonic. So really this whole gamut of these orchestras across the country, professional orchestras across the country, in commissioning this new piece by Juan Pablo. And the piece I'm so excited to share the title because he just shared it with me, is called Mi Chicano. So we're really excited about his piece, this concert on Saturday, but also upcoming next season.
Wonderful. And the piece that's being performed this weekend is Mariachi Land. I'm sure I'm mispronouncing it, but I've heard this piece and it is based on mariachi type music, and it's really an interesting piece of music, and he will be a guest on Inside the Music next season when we do the consortium commission. So that's really, once again, the Fresno Philharmonic is so forward thinking. They're doing these consortium commissions, they're premiering new music, they're performing a diversity of composers. It's just so exciting to me to see, you know, if we compare how things were 10 years ago. I'm so excited.
Well, thank you.
Yeah,
sorry.
I'm sorry, go ahead.
I just wanted to say thank you to the audiences and for all of you here today in Inside the Music for supporting this effort.
We're loving it. We're loving it. It's fabulous. It's just so exciting, so exciting. And speaking of exciting, I am so absolutely excited by the next piece that's going to be performed this weekend, because it's by Kenneth Frolick from Fresno State. And he's brought this or wrote this piece for this clarinetist. And they're both here today. So let's give a big round of applause for Jorge Montilla Moreno. Give a big wave, Jorge, who's coming to us from his motel room, having arrived in Fresno. And Ken Frolick, who's in my upper right-hand corner. It's so wonderful that you're here. I'll give a little introduction and for each of you, and then we'll go into the composition that's coming up. So Jorge was born in Venezuela, and he began his music study in the famous El Sistema program in Venezuela. How many of you were familiar with that? There's a great documentary on that program, and wonderful music come out of that program. Maybe Jorge can talk about this later, but he's a real champion of the E-flat clarinet, which I have tried to play, and it's an utter beast, and it sounds like I'm killing to play in tune, but he plays it amazingly well. And fun fact, he studied same institution that Doc studied, and that's how they met. Ken's wife is a clarinetist, and she and Jorge were in the same studio, and they got to interact with each other at Indiana University. He's now a professor at University of Iowa, which has a fabulous music program. And he also was the performer on a piece that Dr. Frolick submitted when he applied for his job at Fresno State. And I vividly remember hearing this piece called Blue Fire for clarinet and string quartet. And it was so beautiful. I said to myself, oh my God, I wish I had composed that. We have to hire the person that composed this piece because they will kick my butt. And so that turned out to be Ken Froelich. And lastly, Jorge not only is a fabulous clarinet, he's also a composer. So I hope very, very much that you check out his compositions online, because there are some wonderful compositions. So Jorge, give a big wave. I'm trying to find my screen. There you are. Are you in a motel room now?
I am, yes. Thank you, Ben.
And when did you fly in?
2 days ago.
2 days ago?
Yeah, Wednesday night I arrived here.
Wonderful, wonderful. Can you tell us a little bit about what it was like to be in the El Sistema program?
Well, I was born in Caracas, and when I was 10 years old, I enrolled in the El Sistema music program. It's based on the practice of the orchestra and not the academic studies that we think about music, like solfege and theory and all of that. It's amazing, but it's a different approach. Our approach is more like have fun, play an instrument, play in orchestra right away, and then you start figuring out things that you need to know to complement your education and your background in music. So that's how I started when I was 10 years old. By the time that I was 19, I was member of the Simon Bolivar Orchestra, which is the top of the orchestras in Venezuela. And it was at the time too. So, and then I became a principal clarinetist of that orchestra a few years after that. And well, the Sistema grew so much to have 2 or 3 orchestras in every state. And also had like a system of youth orchestras and children orchestras. So from one of those orchestras where Dudamel, the conductor of the LA Philharmonic, he started there in one of those children orchestras. And well, it's a very successful program that has a different approach in music education, but a successful and an interesting one. I think you're muted.
Ben, you're muted.
Yeah.
Yeah, sorry. You can find the name I put in the chat, El Sistema, and you can Google that and look at the program. There's a wonderful documentary about it. I can't remember the name of the documentary. Does anybody remember? Is it just El Sistema? Is that the title of the documentary?
I think there are two documentaries on one called El Sistema.
Okay.
I can see the picture in the DVD, but I cannot remember the name.
Well, if you Google it, there's a wonderful documentary, and I encourage all of you to watch that. So thank you, Jorge, you being here so much. And then the marvelous composer who created this great piece I'm going to be listening to this weekend is Kenneth Froelich. And he was born outside of Philadelphia, raised in San Diego. He happens to be a Padres fan. And he went to, and this is another similarity he has with Jorge, he went to a special program too when he was in San Diego. Those of you that saw the movie Fame, you know, high school Dr. Froelich attended. Then he studied at USC in Indiana University, where he met Jorge. He's now a professor of composition at Fresno State, and he's won several awards, including research awards and the Provost Award for Excellence in Teaching. He's a great teacher, as the students here can attest. He's also a saxophone player, a hidden secret, and another hidden secret, he's a banjo player. And another hidden secret, he's a man of hidden secrets. He has a black belt in Taekwondo, as does his entire family, actually. And the Fresno Phil performed his Symphony #1, the second movement, Spinning Yarns, a few years ago. So welcome, Ken.
Well, thank you so much, Ben. It's a pleasure to be here.
Well, thank you. And very quickly, before we get into the music, I'm just curious, how long did it take you from conception to when you had the parts printed out for the Philharmonic? About how long did that take?
That was about, I want to say, started the piece in fall of 2019. I think I delivered the parts in December 2021. So full 2 years.
2 years. So this is kind of done during a time of intense stress and isolation. It's a COVID piece.
In many ways, I mean, you know, I started the composition, kind of the short score of the piece in the fall of 2019 before COVID hit. I was on sabbatical that semester. Little did I know that when I returned to campus in spring of 2020, I'd be going right back home. and so the orchestration then happened while I was under COVID. And so that definitely happened during that period of time. Originally, we were preparing for a premiere of this work in the spring of 2021, but with the way everything unfolded, the decision was made to postpone it for the year. And so now we are here at this premiere, and I'm very happy that we're able to do it at this point.
Oh, this is wonderful. Good. Thank you. So you were very productive over that time span. I'm starting to feel inferior thinking about the work that took over COVID.
I know what you've been doing, dude. You have nothing to feel bad about.
Oh, you're very kind. So I have a scenario for you, everyone. Are you ready for scenario number 2, real life scenario? Thumbs up. Are you going to participate? Oh, please participate. Okay. Here is your scenario. Your scenario is that you are a composer. And by the way, you are a composer because every time you speak, you modulate your voice, you have a rhythm, you have pitch, you have contour, you have phrasing, you have form, all of that. So you are a composer. We can talk about it more later if you need convincing. So you are a composer and you happen to be, right? So we're pretending, whatever your politics are doesn't matter, right? pretend you're a composer and you are concerned about climate change, okay? And in thinking about this huge problem, you feel a little bit helpless, right? But you want to express your perspective about the topic, okay? So you make a decision that you're going to write a piece for orchestra that's maybe 20-ish minutes long, okay? And in this piece, you somehow want to address this topic and how you feel about the topic. So I want you to just consider for a moment how you might go about doing that. I see a lot of looks like, oh my God, don't ask me to do that. So composers in the room, you are excluded from this exercise. Who has an idea? Non-composer, how might you in music address concerns about climate change? And then we'll see what Dr. Frolick did. Okay, Clarice is saying to put her feelings into words first, then place those feelings to music using instruments that best showcase how you feel. Wonderful. So a translation of your feeling. Wonderful, Clarice. I see why you raised a wonderful musician. Who else has an idea? I think Maureen is talking but is muted. Celeste says she's going to write a piece called Waterless Music and have to speak about it, which is what I did. That was my answer to the scenario. What is your answer to the scenario? So let's open it up to musicians. What would you do? So it's not so easy, is it? Not so easy. So
I'll say something.
Oh, Lorenzo's has an idea.
I would say gather your children and grandchildren into the room and take a look at them and see how you feel about their future, and then translate your feelings into the music.
Okay, wonderful. So thinking about future generations and having a perspective on time that's greater than your lifespan. Okay, so now we have the luxury of asking Dr. Frolick how he approached the piece. And then what we'll do is take each movement. Let's go in general first, Ken, and then we'll go movement by movement. Okay, so just a quick synopsis of how you decided to approach it, and then we'll go movement by movement.
I was about to say, like, ooh, I think I know the answer to this question. So how do you approach such a weighty, monumental, kind of topic? And large part of this is ultimately very, very personal, because this is what my viewpoint is and how I have perceived this issue since growing up as a child. My father was actually a science writer in the 80s, worked at the San Diego Union before it became the San Diego Union Tribune. And so he would write about many of these topics, which we now are very familiar with, but maybe in the early 80s was more just kind of on the periphery. And so he would come home, talk about climate change. And so growing up 5 years old, 6 years old, I was already hearing about this. Of course, we called it global warming at the time, but now we appropriately call it climate change. And this is where my personal perspective comes from this. And so a lot of this piece comes from this kind of perspective of being this individual, observing everything around you in a multifaceted approach. And each movement takes a different kind of observational element, from glaciers melting in the first movement to the California wildfires getting more and more severe in the third movement, to just my own personal frustrations in the second movement. And so that's where this all kind of comes to play.
Wonderful, thank you. And he calls it melt, which I think is a fabulous, fabulous for this. So let's think about the first movement, which is called White Ice. There are some really cool moments in this. Can you just give us an overview? And then I think what might be fun, Dr. Froelich and I talked about this, is to compare the very beginning with the very end of this, and then maybe play just a little snippet from the middle too. Can you share your how you know what you mean by white ice and how you simulated melting in this movement?
Of course.
And Jorge, please feel free to chime in when we're talking about the music and how he does this, okay?
So the overall arch of this, as I mentioned, is it's about kind of like the impression, if you will, of the beauty of a glacier, and starting with this very kind of impressionistic quality of single melody on top of the dynamic kind of landscape that is being created. So I'm using kind of some impressionistic techniques to kind of paint a palette of this world. It's ultimately the most optimistic part of the entire composition because it starts with this sense of majesty that I'm trying to put into the music. But over time, that starts to get a little more fragile and hectic and frantic. And you hear moments where the ice itself starts to crack and you hear these breaks in the music. And then when it returns at the end, the melody that started the piece returns one last time, but the accompaniment in the orchestra starts to just kind of melt away from it, as if it's no longer sustaining and supporting the melody anymore. So I'm using a little Debussy trick there called reharmonization, where I present the same melody both times, but the harmony under it has changed.
And I
Wonderful.
have to say,
yes,
yeah,
go.
I have to say, conducting this piece is really exciting in discovering all of these elements. But in that moment, particularly when the strings are melting away, it's just this really incredible, visceral feeling that you get when you hear this as they're glissandoing down half step ever so slightly. It's just an incredible moment.
Thank you.
So everyone, here's the score of a passage that I'm going to play, and you can see along the left-hand margin all of the different instruments that Ken is writing for, and the solo clarinet part is right here. And you see that the way basically the woodwinds are up here, then the brass, then all of the percussion, then the solo clarinet is here, and the strings are on the bottom. So you can see the way that Dr. Froelich does this. There's a statement made, and then the clarinet is responding. A statement made, the clarinet is responding, and responding with these kind of virtuosic little gestures and little figures. Let's listen to this this is about 1 minute, about 45 seconds from the start. I have to share my tunes as it turns out for you to be able to hear this. So we can't look at the score at the same time, but here's a little snippet of that very, near the very beginning. So that's how it is at the sort of near the very beginning of it. And then at the end of that movement, right here, those of you that are musicians, we have basically the same thing, right, Ken? But in this instance, you do it so that it sounds like the glacier now is melting. Is that right?
Yeah, it's kind of like the last gasps, if you will, because it's now just kind of melting away down from there.
So let's listen to a snip of that. Here we go. I have to share the iTunes. So you can hear things are going down this time. So the glacier melts away at that point. I think that's just really a beautiful, it really does conjure up a feeling of ice and of melting. I think that's just a brilliant, brilliant passage. And I'll just, it's 6:15. There's another place I just absolutely love. I think that's where, no, I'm looking for where, oh, at 3:08 is where the ice breaks off of the glacier. It sounds to me like. So if I can play this passage, it's one of my favorite passages in the whole piece because of how Ken writes this. So see if you can hear the ice breaking and then splintering. Did you hear it? I love that. How brilliant is that? I just love that. I think that's absolutely brilliant. Jorge, do you have any thoughts on this movement?
Yeah, I have something to say that is from the point of view of the clarinetist, that some of the most important or recognizable music that we have for the clarinet start with that kind of, if you, for example, the Mozart Clarinet Quintet. So it starts with doing an arpeggio that goes from the low to the high, or the of the Brahms Quintet. So this also explores the clarinet from the lower register to the high register, which is one of the things that we love the most as clarinet players. And I think the audiences also love and appreciate about the clarinet is that ability to play in here. And then go all the way to the higher notes. So I think that this is very idiomatic for the clarinet, these entrances. As you call them like a question and answer in terms of the musical structure and in terms of the narrative. And I think that is also idiomatic for the clarinet to have And as I say, these are the things that we know how to do, that people recognize us for, and that can be exploited in this way to make the instrument shine naturally. That will be really difficult to do for another instrument, especially a brass instrument. No offense.
Well, thank you. So yeah, very, very idiomatic clarinet writing. Let's quickly move along, since we want to at least say a little something about each movement. Let's move along to movement number 2, gray matter. Ken, do you want to tell us your thought on that?
So this is the fast movement of the 3, although there is definitely some fast material in the 3rd movement as well. And I like to describe this movement as getting a sneak peek inside my anxiety-riddled brain, and seeing all the just extreme kind of quick motion that's going on. So yeah, as mentioned earlier, this really is an expression of frustration in many ways, though, because it's a movement about the inability to feel like there's nothing that you can really do as an individual, and feeling like all of this is going around. And so it's, again, this nervous energy that's coming behind it. And so a lot of the idea behind gray matter really plays upon the very basic idea of my brain is melting. And so if you're thinking about what is melting, that is what's happening right there.
Well, let's play a little snippet from about 1 minute in. And I would show the score, but it's a lot of notes. It moves really fast. And then I'd love to hear Ray and Jorge's perspective on this movement, because it seems just so virtuosic to me. So here's just a little snippet inside Dr. Frolick's brain. Yeah, I kind of don't want to stop that, but I'm getting energized. Who needs coffee? Who needs coffee? I'm going to listen to this second movement in the morning.
Well, and this is what makes music so powerful. Like Clarice was saying, putting emotion into the music and having that as a way of expression. And I feel like this movement in particular is not just about Ken's brain, but all of our brains, when we're multitasking, or when we're stressed, or when we have a lot of anxiety. I think it really reflects so much of that, of our personal journeys, especially mine. I know that during COVID, it was very much about, how are we going to do these concerts? And even this concert, I have to share with you, with Omicron happening in January, we were concerned about how we're going to have 80 musicians plus on stage for this March concert. And we persevered. And thanks to all of you for being here, and Ken for writing this piece. And all those things run through my mind. So we're just thrilled that this is happening. But again, that fear and anxiety is, I think, something that we can all share.
I think so too. And I think that would be amplified if I were Jorge and I was expected to play that in a couple of days. So let's do a mental check-in with you on how you feel about that second movement.
Okay, well, yeah, it was a little bit of a surprise. I saw some of the generating ideas when I met with Kenneth in Iowa a few years ago, and there was nothing like this projected to be. So we are gonna play very nervously, but not as fast as the recording. And sometimes we think that the music editors can play anything. They just go faster or slower, and they don't care so much about the real human beings playing. But the music is amazing, and the music is very reflects his mind, and also, as Ray said, the mind of all of us. Anyway, I want to say an anecdote that came to my mind. I went to the doctor a few years ago, and the doctor asked me, I don't know, I noticed a little bit of anxiety. Are you anxious? And I say, in which planet do you live? We are all anxious. So anxiety is part of our life, and it's something that we learn to cope with, but it's part of how we live, and part of how we deal with our lives. So I think that this music reflects that, not only for Kenneth, but for all of us. And I think we're enjoying it pretty well. It's a movement more complicated for notes, but it's less complicated for meters. Nice. So makes it that the orchestra can play together easily, in a way, with the soloist. And I think we're enjoying it very well and very much.
Wonderful. And you bring up an interesting point. What we're listening to is a mock-up that Ken did, which is what composers do, right? But it's going to be really interesting to hear the difference in the mock-up in a live orchestra. There's no way that you can, or experience of hearing something performed live. So let's go on to the third movement, which is called Black Steel. You want to tell us a little bit about that, Ken?
Sure. So this one brings it home, because when we're talking about the impact of climate change here, of course, this is talking directly about the influence with wildfire. And for me, I was kind of picturing a building which had been destroyed as a result of one of the many wildfires that we had the past couple years here in the state, and seeing just some of the ashes and remnants, but then these girders were sticking out that were just still present, but just charred. And that black kind of piece of metal is really the image that I started to get out of that. And so I wanted to capture a variety of very kind of dark, earthy colors in this. And from there, the match is struck, if you will, with the use of the clarinet cadenza. And from there, it starts to build into this kind of sense of almost out of control, basically destruction within the music itself. Where this comes from is, again, relatively fast moving passage work, some very virtuosic writing as well. But ultimately it comes together, I think, in this just image of just a kind of a whirlwind of flame, if you will.
Well, let's hear just a couple of snippets. I'll just play a snippet, Scrolls, play a snippet, and then we'll hear Ray and Jorge's comments on it, and then we'll take questions. So think about questions you'd like to ask Ray or Jorge or Ken. So here is a little few snippets of movement 3. I happen to love that sound. That's why I'm... I'm not going to spoil the ending for you, but I think he really captures that feeling of like oh my gosh, destruction, right? I think he does in that. And you know, Ray, I'm going to have fun watching you conduct all of the different meter changes and all of the off measure cues in the brass and all of that.
Yes, it's challenging, but again, Ken writes so beautifully that it all makes sense to me when I'm working on a piece like this. Sometimes composers do that. It's a little bit just difficult, you know, like really, like Stravinsky's Rite of Spring at the end, can we just remeter that whole ending? No, but I think that I really actually, this is my favorite movement, is Black Steel. It's very dramatic, but we're having to really make adjustments as we're rehearsing this piece. And that's one of the things that I love about creative process of new music and premieres, is that, you know, Ken and I last night were, and Jorge, of course, were involved in balance and tempos, in fluctuations of, you know, just the colors that are happening live on stage, you know, for the first time. And so this is very exciting for me.
Jorge, do you have any thoughts? And also, you're going to be doing something many people in the audience haven't heard before on the clarinet. You might want to prepare them for that.
Yes, well, this movement features extended techniques in the clarinet. So clarinet is also, as a relatively modern instrument, able to produce a wide array of extended techniques, of which, talking with Kenneth, he chose the ones that fit better his music. And one of these extended techniques is the multiphonics, or the production of more than one note at a time. So we're used to the clarinet playing just one note, but for here, sometimes you hear and Kenneth even went a little bit farther to put a trill. So that's one of the multiphonics that you will hear. That's another one.
It's interesting, Jorge. Zoom, we first bit of that, and then Zoom thinks it's noise, and so Zoom cancels it out. But we hear it at the very beginning. But it's not noise; it's a beautiful sound.
Yeah, and it will be much better in the cadenza of the clarinet concerto tomorrow. And I want to say that maybe it wasn't necessary to write a cadenza, but it's a clarinet concerto. So we have either the Nielsen clarinet concerto that has 3 cadenzas, or we have the Mozart clarinet concerto that has no cadenzas at all. So then the appearance of a cadenza in this concerto makes it wonderful. And also, it had to have a flashy ending for the orchestra and for the soloist, because it's a clarinet concerto anyway. So I think Kenneth did a wonderful job writing this piece. I'm hearing for the first time some of the rationale for the writing of this concerto. I mean, the philosophical posture. And I love it. I love it more every second. I think that's wonderful.
Well, let us now open it up. And we've heard from these wonderful musicians and composers and conductor, and I'm that you have some questions. So let's open the floor. Students, this is where you chime in to get a brownie point.
I'll ask a question.
Thank you, Lorenzo.
Okay. Well, let's talk about the multiphonics. And Kenneth, when you're writing them, do you work with a clarinetist and say, what's possible? Or do you say, do this, even though it's not possible?
So first of all, often with multiphonics, every instrument's a little different, right? And this is actually a little out of my wheelhouse in some ways, because I'm not one who normally goes for things like multiphonics, but in this piece, it just made a lot of sense. I really want to try to grab them and work off of them and try to put them into the piece. And so I actually have a text that I was operating with to kind of say, all right, this is the types of multiphonics that are available. This is approximately what it is that it's going to sound like. But until we actually get together, have a chance to hear it live, it's really difficult to know exactly what each of those individual multiphonics are going to sound like. So, you know, because doing it over a phone or over Zoom like that, as you hear, you don't really get a good perspective of what that color is going to be. So actually with rehearsal yesterday, hearing those multiphonics, we were kind of sitting in one of the edits we kind of looked at, it's like, well, those I thought worked really, really well. That one is not coming out the way I envisioned it to be. And so we're actually going to remove one of them that consistently goes and just replace it with a standard pitch. But the ones that like Jorge presented just now with the trill and all that, that does capture the essence of what it is. So it's a little bit of, you know, kind of a process where you have to really kind of hear and see, is this the sound you want? Because every multiphonic is a little different. I played multiphonics on the saxophone when I was a high school kid, not even knowing what I was doing, just because I thought, hey, look at the sound I can make. And, you know, so that's, I think some of where that comes from, but it does create, I think, that really kind of strained, unearthly beauty that I'm trying to put into the music.
Thank you for that question. And Ken was talking about the influence of him being a saxophone player. He and I discussed this yesterday, actually, that to me, a lot of those string lines and everything that you're going to hear, those would make fabulous jazz licks. And in fact, yesterday I stole a couple of them and started practicing them for use in a jazz context. So another question.
I want to say something real quick that
yes.
that as a clarinet player, as a performer, we usually don't play the music where the multiphonics don't work. So if you are a composer, and this is for the universe, not for you, for Ben, or for Kenneth. This is for the universe, for the international community. If we have a multiphonics that we cannot play, that are not able to come out for some reason, we don't play that piece. So the collaboration with the performer is crucial for the preservation of the music and for the continuation of the continuation of this music being performed. So Kenneth and I had a good conversation about this, and we talk about literature and about books that have the multiphonics, and also, but as he said, it is until I played them that I know if my clarinet is going to be able to make those sounds. And even with that fingering, I could get different sets of multiphonics. Mm-hmm. So I have to actually go for the one that he wrote to make it happen. Okay, thank you.
Thank you. And I think Marcus had his hand up.
Yeah, I was just going to ask Dr. Froelich, was there any particular texture or instrument combination that you used in this that worked really well but might not be expected?
So you're referring into the orchestration, right? So the combinations of sounds there. Yeah, there's a couple moments where I isolate the kind of like woodwind consorts, and have these really kind of just beautiful little moments right there. And you know, hearing that is one kind of color that I listened to and said that came out really well. There's a place in the third movement though I'm thinking of right now, where the clarinet's playing kind of a solo line on top of the harp, the piano, and the celeste and the piccolo. And you just have this very delicate kind of like almost starry like texture, and the clarinet's just kind of like decorating around it. And it's just, that's one of those moments that like, oh, that's a color that I really just was so pleased with and happening. And, you know, it's like, it has this very kind of metallic like quality with all those instruments, but really happy with that combination.
Okay, and very quickly, we have about 2 minutes and then we have to cut off, but I see Bryce has a question.
Yes, hello, thank you very much. This is really cool, so it's great to be here. I actually had a question for Ken Frolick. So there are several musical elements that kind of make a concerto, the cadenza, of course, being one of them. So I'm curious to know what traditions you maintained and also how you added to the genre. In other words, what makes this a Froelich concerto?
It's a Froelich concerto because there's a lot of notes. But so it does maintain the 3-movement structure that you would normally expect of a concerto, but it kind of has a little bit of a role reversal where normally you expect kind of a fast, slow, fast structure within the concerto. And here it really arguably could be said that it's a slow, fast, slow that becomes fast. And so we kind of flip that around a little bit from the tempo perspective. And so I think that was something which I kind of put in there. Also, the location of the cadenza being kind of about a third of the way through the third movement is an unusual location. You know, I think of a clarinet, so the cadenza is kind of like ending the first movement possibly. And instead, I'm kind of flipping the order of where that happens.
Well, I am just so excited to hear this world premiere. And the last piece on the concert is Edgar Elgar. And, you know, I actually, the Enigma variations is something we study a lot in composition class. And I think that he's an underplayed performer. So I'm just excited by the entire program. And I'm so excited that all of you are here and that you're supporting the Fresno Philharmonic and the adventuresome coolness of what the Fresno Phil is now.